We're here to talk about the state of India's economy, and I know you've spoken a lot about it, but there's been a lot that's been happening in the last few weeks, including this hope that's been attached to the 7.5% GDP decline, which some are saying is not as bad as was feared. State Bank of India analysis of more than 40 countries is saying it's actually better than the global average. Does it give you any hope at all?
Well, it's better than the 23% decline in the first quarter. So, yes, we didn't have a serious lockdown in the second quarter, and clearly there has been some recovery since. It's probably too early to celebrate. What you worry about is what the scarring to the economy has been. How many firms are going to have closed, never to reopen again? How many people have lost their jobs, never to get them back again? And how many households, especially the poorer ones, are now skimping and missing meals, taking their children out of school? How many children essentially have their education set back for years to come because they simply haven't had the means to keep up? So I think there is a substantial amount of damage. I think the signs for the big firms are, demand is back. But of course, there's a lot of pent-up demand. We don't know how much is sustainable over the medium term. And if people have lost their jobs, if firms have closed down, it is going to have an effect on the long-term sustainable demand. So, I would say two things. One, we need to watch and wait and see how this plays out. Pranav Sen, a few days ago, the former chief statistician, had a very bleak interview on what he really thought was going on. But also, I think he made a very good point, which is that what really matters, and this is something I've been saying for some time, is the long-term scarring to the economy. What is our growth? We used to talk 8%, then we talk 6%. Now we probably have to talk 5 and less unless we really do what is necessary.
Yeah. And in fact, one of the points that Pranav Sen has been making is that he expects the quarter three numbers to be much worse, that he actually thinks that manufacturing has gone down in a sort of grave way. Now, we had the chief economic advisor talking about a V-shaped recovery. And people are going to latch on to the 7.5% to say that it's some sort of beginning. We have questions already on our live stream saying, do you see any reason to believe at all that there is any indication of a V-shaped recovery?
Well, recovery is always V-shaped till it stops being V-shaped, right? Right. From the depths of the first quarter, clearly we are coming back, and that's positive. It's good news. The question is how long it goes, and it may well go beyond it. This is what you see in Europe and the United States, that in their calculation, because they have different fiscal years, it was the third quarter, which was a splendid recovery for them. That would correspond to our second quarter. Of course, the fourth quarter is turning out to be quite bad because they have the resurgence of the virus in much of Europe and also in the United States. So first, early days. Second, pent-up demand. There is a substantial amount of pent-up demand. Some people have built up savings, especially the richer and well-off people. They spent it. Now, that is going to result in stronger demand for a while. The question is, what does it settle down to? And if you have the levels of unemployment that CMI talks about, if you see the number of discouraged workers that are there in the data, my colleague Marianne Bertrand tells me that, a number of people have left the workforce. If all that is true, then incomes over the medium term are going to be lower than what you might otherwise expect, which means that effectively you go back down to a lower level than you were before. For sure, the trajectory is good. The question is how long it lasts. And I don't think anybody really knows that, in fact, it is going to go back to where it was.
Now, one of the points that you've been making is that this is not just a consequence of COVID. Of course, the lockdown has played its part, and the jury's certainly out on whether the lockdown was a smart idea. Personally, having traveled across India, I actually believe that it was a copy and paste Western idea that didn't apply very well to countries like ours. But you have been making the point that there have been previous, what you've called jhatkas to the economy, demonetization, an ill-conceived or an ill-executed rollout of the GST, and then COVID. Do you see any sort of cogency in any of the interventions that have been made by the government thus far?
Well, thus far is a very strong indictment, and I wouldn't go there. What I would say is, if you look at the history of this government, it has been quite good at redistribution. Finding ways to send money to households in different forms, whether it's the Ujjwala Yojana, whether it is the Shauchalaya, the toilets. It's been sort of effective. Now, we need to see longer term whether the objectives have been achieved there, and that requires careful study. But those redistributive mechanisms have been good. Where it has not succeeded is in maintaining growth. And this is the point, growth came down steadily. Now, if you're spending money, but you're not earning it, what happens? You run larger and larger deficits. That's effectively what happened before the pandemic. We were running a huge fiscal deficit, but this government is also very good at masking the data. We did not know how bad it was. The Controller and Auditor General came out with a report which basically said, look, you are spending far more than you admit to. And the proof of that is during this pandemic, when the government should be spending more, it's unable to spend. In fact, the second quarter numbers that you saw, Mr. Sen made it a point to say the government is spending less at a time it should be spending more. So the point is that management at the macro level has been wanting. And part of that, part of the lack of growth is because of this policy by Jhatka. We come out with some, something dreamt up at the center with a fairly limited preparation. And when that happens, obviously a large economy of the kind we are now responds in ways that are unanticipated. And we haven't thought about what we would do if it responds in that way. And the effect is offsetting back growth. And so I would say that, kudos for the improvement in redistribution, but we must also worry about growth. And that's where this government has not done enough. And unfortunately, with what is happening in the pandemic, the long-term damage to the economy may be significant. And that is another concern, that we will not go back to anywhere near the growth levels we need to keep the young employed.